This is one of the weirder streams that I've wanted to do. Um, but like, I figure if I'm gonna sink like 30 plus hours into this game, I'm gonna do something useful with it. I don't know why specifically I want to yell about all these games. They're not story focused games, but uh, anyway, um, so just to kind of demonstrate things before we get in too deep, I'm going to this one. Yes. Uh, I'm going to show off real quick, and we're going to have to check the volume balance on this and stuff. I'm going to show off what the gameplay and most importantly the storytelling bits actually look like, and also show off the opening sequence.
さて、始めようかね。突撃！はぐれ！撃つなら我を撃て！お父様！時代が動き出すね。幸運が開けましたな。我が輩のものだ。撃て！手後の隙よ。信長様のよう切り開くのです。この一戦に勝ち、豊臣の世を守り抜くのだ。義は我らにあり。太平の世をなさん。雪村、来い、勝負だ。
So welcome to Samurai Warriors. Um, if you've never been into a Warriors game before, congratulations, you've somehow missed it. They've never been huge, but they've been around since like the PS2 era. So there's two main Warriors series. Like, Koei Tecmo has been doing a whole lot of spin-off Warriors games in recent years. Fire Emblem, Hyrule Warriors. They did the One Piece Warriors games. They did a Fist of the North Star Warriors out of nowhere. But their two main ones are... Yeah, there was the Gundam Warriors. Their two main ones, though, are Dynasty Warriors, which is based off of, loosely, The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the Chinese historical novel, and Samurai Warriors, which is based off of the End of the Warring States era. Right. That same team did Persona 5 Scramble. They've done a lot of games in this style. But this is specifically their one that is fictitious history. And I will start a stage in story mode to kind of show off how the story in these games is actually demonstrated. Eeny, meeny, miny.
Nani yatsu? 松永久秀、天下の大役人と呼ぶ者もある。見ろ、血湧き肉躍る者のふどもの行軍を。天が告げておる。真の乱世の始まりをな。お主も導かれここに来たのだろう。 出すぞ。室町時代後期、全国各地で争いが起こり、世は終わりの見えぬ戦国時代へと突入した。そんな中、駿河の大名今川義元は天下に号令し、乱世に秩序をもたらすべく大軍を率いて上洛を開始。三河の徳川家康など従属する大名を従えて成進し、手始めに尾張の弱小大名織田家を潰さんとした。ところがそこに予想外の嵐が起こる。織田家当主信長は豪雨の中、家臣らに出陣を下知した。戦国を変える一筋の星、時代を進める一陣の風。戦国の運命はこの桶狭間から動き出そうとしていた。織田の将、桶狭間の戦い。
We might see a couple after character select here. Yeah, there's also these kind of scenes, which happen sometimes.
喧嘩違いがある戦だ。多勢に無勢、勝ちの目なし。腕が鳴るね。わしゃそうでもねえと踏んどるわ。信長様にはきっと考えが終わりになる。なるほど。この絶望的な戦に勝ったとなりゃ、尾張の小大名も一躍天下争いに加われるわけだ。柴田殿も同じ考えじゃろ。そうでなきゃ追放中の利家を連れてこんわ。実は勝ちが決まっとる戦で利家活躍させて、その功で織田家に復帰させてやろうと。猿がごちゃごちゃうるさいわ。さような打算、戦の外に置いてまいれ。勝たばよし、負けるとも戦って果てるが武士が本望ってかい。次第は勝った者が紡げばよい。それ以外に何がある。刑事、俺の追放の件じゃ前だけに迷惑かけた。秀吉、お前にもいろいろ。わしらはダチじゃ。気にすんな、利家。おじご勝家が言ったこと聞こえてなかったのかい。今は一個のもののふとして戦はかけようぜ。
So that's basically the style of how you get this story in this game. There's the occasional full FMV cutscene, like usually 2 or 3 per storyline. There's mostly random chatter, like in camp before or after battles. And there's like those scenes where it zooms out and goes like historical documentary, kind of. And those are the setup because the actual game is not super conducive to storytelling. This is a very action-first game. I'll play it for like a minute so you get a sense of like partially the gameplay, but also partially how the actual story is being told during it. the actual storytelling within battles is largely focused on uh, let's let's just discuss the immediate movements of people around us. Here's where you need to go. Oh, this group's panicking. I need to go help them, etc. So the actual in stage doesn't provide a whole lot of storytelling usually. There's the occasional exception, but for the most part, this is what it's like. Just beating your way through a ton of dudes, stage by stage, occasionally having showdowns with other cool people, but also completely trashing them, because this game in particular, especially by Samurai Warrior standards, is super easy. But that's the kind of game that we are dealing with. This is... Yeah, these are very silly games. It is rooted in history, but, like, obviously, there is a degree of very silly exaggeration here, both in how the characters are designed, with some of them being more grounded, and some of them, especially as we get further into the series, being increasingly wild in how they are designed. And also, just, like, in general, the action of the series is meant to be super over the top. All these people are super hecking human. Cecil brings up, a lot of these games tend to veer into very what-if territory. Samurai Warriors 4, for the most part, actually tries to stay out of that. To some degree. It's still got its own fictitious history going on. But even stories that you know are going to end in tragedy, where you are playing the losing side in this one, the battle will make a point that either you end up having to escape as the final objectives, or, like, you might win in the moment in a brave showdown, but it will lead into somebody major dying, etc., etc. But that's the kind of game we're dealing with. I'm going to swap over now, close the game out, put on some background music, which will be the soundtrack for this game. I have this. I meant to bring that up immediately without doing the black screen, but whatever. I have a big fancy display that will show us what character we're talking about with their fancy official artwork. Generally their most recent artwork, but there was a couple characters that I was like, that doesn't really look like, for whatever reason I just decided not to, but for the most part it's the major artwork for the characters from the game. Alright, let me bring up, make sure I can see everything. So, what I'm going to be ranking is I'm going to be ranking how much I give a damn about these characters after experiencing all of the story modes. There's like 10 story modes, by the way, for different clans and groups and such. I hope the music isn't too loud, by the way. Please let me know if it is. Turn it down a little bit more just in case. Sound balance is perfect? Good. But yeah, this is going to be focused on how I feel about the characters specifically. Not anything to do with their gameplay, generally speaking. And I'm also going to try to focus on just within the bounds of Samurai Warriors 4. Because, like, technically I have played Samurai Warriors 1 and 2 and Chronicles and a tiny bit of 3 on the Wii. But it's been literally probably a decade since I'd done that, so, like... this is where I'm currently focusing things. Yeah, so I'm ranking it on story. What else was I going to say? I'm going to probably get some historical details wrong, because the game gave them to me wrong, or I didn't like catch on to some relations. Like there's some characters that I'm still like, out of this massive cast here, there's still people that I'm like, who are you related to other people? What is your connection to other people? I'm not in. I might know what like people they are usually seen around, but we'll get into that. There's 55 characters, I believe, in Samurai Warriors 4. Down in the bottom, I have a bracket specifically for not appearing in this game, son, which is a bunch of characters that were added to Samurai Warriors 4-2 or 4 Empires, because there is a Samurai Warriors 4 Part 2, kind of, which is the same basic game engine, but it's 13 character-specific stories, and is a lot more fictionalized, to my understanding. And, like, I've already played so goddamn much of this game that even though it's probably going to hurt a bunch of the characters to not have done their character-specific stories in 2, I'm ranking Samurai Warriors 4, not Samurai Warriors 4 Part 2. I was trying to think if there was anything else that I wanted to say before I really dig into this. I think that's everything. So, get comfy. Let me make sure I can see everything. Okay. So, first, I was about to make a tier for who am I currently ranking. I literally have his picture over on the side. First up, Yukimura Sanada. As you probably guessed from the opening cutscene, literally the poster boy of the franchise, because he's there at the start of the events of the story, working for the Takeda clan. This dude down here, I think you guys can see my mouse. Should be able to, yeah. He starts out as a samurai under Shingen Takeda. Shingen passes away, and he kind of jumps factions for a little bit. Eventually ends up on the losing side of the war that unifies Japan. But then, like, there is one final rebellion that caps off the very end of the story, where it's like 15 years after all of that, the last of the Toyotomi tries to rebel against Ieyasu Tokugawa, and there's one final showdown, and at the helm of that, like, the major character making basically the last charge and fighting the last war is Yukimura Sanada. For some reason, he is idolized as a result of that. It feels a little bit weird to me to take the dude who refuses to go down without a fight and drags... Technically, he's not the one dragging everybody into war, but he's like the bannerman of that last war. Like, it feels really strange, even if he completely embodies the idea of what a samurai is supposed to be. Because they do a really poor job of actually selling his motives as particularly noble or anything. Like, not in a way of they make him sound shady, but he is 100% a warrior pride character, and that's about where his character begins and ends. And, like, I won't lie, at least part of the reason that I wanted to do this tier list was to specifically slander Yukimura Sanada, because he's kind of milquetoast. The dude is the poster child of the franchise, and I don't feel like there's anything interesting about him at all, despite being so much of the story and, like, being central to so much of the story. Like, I don't think there's a single character you play as in more stages than Yukimura Sanada. Like, he has a pretty look to him. I'll agree to that. Like, they made him very handsome and very visually appealing, but he's so the samurai archetype that it doesn't really do much. I feel like they picked him as the poster boy in the first game, then the timeline kept progressing without him historically. That's a reasonable take, yeah. God, that's the thing that I forgot to go over, is my, is like my tier list. My beloved is characters that I'm incapable of being unbiased about after this. I just really enjoy them. Successful is like, I think this character does what the character sets out to do really well and makes them interesting and like lands emotional beats and I understand their story. Okay enough is like, you're fine, I don't actively dislike you. You have something. Boring is for the characters that I really think are just underserved, like Yukimura. Like, they're a little too archetypal. And then, literally, who are you? Are for a few characters that we're going to get into, where I'm just like, you're a playable character in this game. I don't know a damn thing about you. Okay. But that's where I'm putting Yukimura to start us off, which is not a strong start for this game. I don't know, all that time focused on him and they did not manage to sell me on him. Did that successfully change? It did successfully change it. Okay. I need some windows so I can be sure that I can see that at all times. Give me just a second. Ooh, do I have a way I can arrange that on my... That's really unfortunate. I don't have that. That'll have to do. Okay. I'm not a professional. In case anybody was wondering for even like half a second, I am not remotely a professional. Is that Yugi from Toho? No, this is Keiji Maeda. You saw him in the opening beats of the story and stuff. Keiji... The funny thing is I think in terms of what his historical impact and relevance is, I don't really know. I know that he's the younger of the Maeda clan. Which the other dude that we'll get to in the clan looks younger than him, but is apparently Keiji's uncle. I know Keiji is apparently responsible for a fair amount of, like, inspiring Kabuki. Which, you know, you look at the design on him and you're like, okay, that makes some sense. He is a decently fun character when he shows up, because he is kind of like, if Yukimura is the dude who will not let go of battle but acts noble about it and is all warrior spirit, Keiji is the dude who is out there to fight, to just have a good time, and tends to show up wherever he feels like the fighting is going on the most. Like, he starts out with the Oda, and then when they start actually unifying people and settling down, he screws off to the north end of Japan to go hang around the Date for a bit. Just because they're in the middle of their own fighting. I don't know, Keiji's like the entertaining version of Yukimura. I wish I knew what significance he had to the story, because these characters are ordered in the way that they are in, like, the character select, which also orders them basically by the order that they were introduced to the series. Keiji's been around since the first game, and I still can't tell you anything about what his historical importance is. But he is fun about it. He's here for a good time, not a long time, exactly. Okay. Next up is this motherfucker. Nobunaga Oda. You might have heard his name before. Because everything that ever deals with Japanese history talks about Nobunaga Oda in some capacity. Oda is literally, at the start of the story, he is a nobody lord who is on the way as a neighboring lord decides to go after the emperor. Beats that dude up with a small amount of troops, and then goes, actually, you know what, going for the emperor sounds like fun. Goes for the emperor, and then proceeds to almost conquer Japan. And I will say, he's actually done really interestingly in the Samurai Warriors series. He's not done in like a actively has any sort of demonic powers or anything. There are a couple of characters who are implied to have supernatural abilities for various reasons, or literally are using magic in their fighting kits and stuff. He just kind of has like he has the feel of being like a Darth Vader Emperor type character, but isn't really that inhuman. He's not literally portrayed as a demon like he is in certain series, like the Onimusha series, which I believe literally has him as the demon lord. And as an actual character, they really lean into the idea that he was completely incomprehensible as a leader. Like, he was very powerful, he was very influential, but you would have no idea whether he was going to show you mercy or not. There's a dude we're going to get to down the line, who, like, actively is trying to backstab Nobunaga, is making it clear he is trying to kill Nobunaga, and Nobunaga's constantly like, I like you. You're working for me. And then there are people that he ends up related to that he's like, oh, you're rebelling? Execution. Done with you. He is like, and it's that incomprehensibility that puts him up here, and I'm kind of considering maybe S tier. Because it's like he is generally a villain in the story. A lot of his retainers are like, yes, he's unifying the land, but is the land going to be okay under him if he succeeds? But like, yeah, no, he's a super memorable and interesting character, and we're going to keep talking about Nobunaga when we're talking about like the things that other characters have in connection to him, because like, there's kind of two eras of the story. There's the era of the story where Nobunaga is rising to power, and then there's the era of the story after he is betrayed and killed that leads into the rest of the story and like the factions breaking back up and then other people sweeping in to finish the job. So he is super important to the story. Yeah, no, he's good. Speaking of assassination of Nobunaga, Mitsuhide Akechi. This pretty boy is, from the start, one of Nobunaga's most, like, faithful retainers and samurai. And, like, he starts off very much like, yeah, I'm here to serve Oda. But over the course of it, he starts to doubt himself, seeing what Oda is doing, and also because he starts kind of forming a friendship with Hisahide, the dude who we'll get to in time, who is the one who's very openly trying to backstab Nobunaga. And eventually, when Nobunaga's like very well along his conquest, he sends out a whole bunch of his retainers to go fight in different areas of Japan, and Mitsuhide makes the sudden decision to turn around and goes and backstabs Nobunaga. And interestingly, like, every single thing that tackles the betrayal at Honnoji does it a little bit differently. In Samurai Warriors 4 specifically, he fights Nobunaga in the middle of a burning temple, but can't actually bring himself to kill Nobunaga, and Nobunaga's like, I expected my retainers that if they're going to betray me, that they will commit to their betrayal. And then walks off into the flames and is never seen again, and it's just assumed by everybody else that Mitsuhide did kill him. Which is one heck of an interpretation of the ambiguity around those events that apparently exists historically. Naturally, we do see a whole bunch of what's going on with Mitsuhide. So he gets a lot of screen time, and while he's very solemn and serious, there is enough of him bouncing off the other characters that he is enjoyable for it. like, especially when we get into, like, his daughter and Motonari and stuff, who very much disarm him. And I think his conflict is interestingly done, and yeah, he's not Nobunaga level good, but as a major player in the first arc, the one bit who's responsible for sending the Oda clan crashing to the ground and ending that legacy, yeah, no, that's good. He's good. Okay. Next up is this this dude, Goemon. So, Goemon is a famous thief. Now, I said that I'm evaluating this within the bounds of Samurai Warriors 4. He shows up in, like, one chapter angry at Nobunaga about something, and that's the only time you see him during the main story. There's 4 characters in this crew that are like that, where you just do not see them within the story. They specifically, like, they are historical characters in the sense of the franchise has had them, and it doesn't like cutting out characters. The fan base responds poorly when their fave doesn't come back. But those 4 characters that we'll get into are specifically, like, their focus is in the Chronicle mode, the custom character mode, as the characters that you get at the start of that mode, and will thus befriend first and learn about that way. I probably could have waited until I was done with all of the, like, extra scenes with all the characters in Chronicle mode, where you do get to actually, like, social link every single one of these characters, complete with romance arguable by the end of some of them. And, like, Goemon is a fun character in that. The dude literally fights with a cannon on his back, by the way. Like, it's a fireworks cannon that he hauls around and, like, just, like, bends down to fire. It's great. It's fun. But, like, literally within the story, he could just about not exist. Also, I'm realizing that's Hideyoshi in the background of that art, chasing him down after he steals the thing in one of the social links from Chronicles mode. So that's funny. Okay, next up. Kenshin Uesugi. So, of the various, like, families that defy the Oda for a long time, the Uesugi, who are one of the eastern families, we'll say, the eastern side of Japan drama, Kenshin's the god of war. And we'll get into him and his rival Shingen, like, again when we get to Shingen. But, like, almost every single rivalry that you will run into in Japanese, like, pop culture is inspired by this dude and his rival, because they kept fighting for years in battle after battle, and neither of them could actually definitively beat the other. Historically, I've heard that one of Kenshin's poems is literally an ode about how, like, disappointed he is that he's not the dude who finished off his rival, and his rival died of illness instead. Like, having said that, prior to Samurai Warriors 4, I didn't care about Kenshin at all. For having been, like, a perpetual part of the scenery in the Eastern Japan story in previous games, Kenshin was boring as hell. In this game, they actually develop out his family a bunch more. Specifically his relationship with his children, which we'll get into when we talk about, who is it, Kagematsu and Kagetora? That actually goes a decent way towards, like, humanizing him and, like, going into his philosophy of, like, what he was actually fighting for, which was basically the Uesugi supported the weak and the downtrodden as champions of that, as opposed to necessarily, like, fighting for a noble faction. They were very charitable and stuff, and I like, that humanizing element has actually pushed him up. I still don't think he's great, but I like him now, as opposed to not giving a shit about him, which is actually a major improvement. Oh, that makes some tropes make sense? Oh, yeah. There's a lot. If you know Japanese history and start learning about the Warring States period, there's a lot of stuff that starts to make sense about, like, a lot of anime and such. Okay. Next up is our first female character, Oichi. Oh, Oichi. Oh no. So this is Nobunaga's sister. And she's a good girl and she deserves the world. And you can probably guess by the way that I'm talking that her story is a tragedy. Her tale doesn't end great. Basically, as Nobunaga's expanding his territory, there's a lord nearby that he decides to basically arrange a political marriage for, where he marries off his sister to Nagamasa Azai, who we'll talk about in a bit. And Oichi actually comes to love him a lot. A whole lot. So much so that when Nagamasa decides that he can't stand for Nobunaga's bullshit anymore, and Japan needs to be saved from him, she continues to side with Nagamasa. Even though she realizes fairly quickly, and all of her former friends back on Nobunaga's side are like, hey, come back, like, before Nobunaga makes us kill you, please. Even her husband's like, you should probably go with them. You'll be safe if we win, and if we lose, you'll still be safe that way. And she's like, no, I'm gonna stay with you. And it actually makes her, like, that dedication and stuff, like, it's very much a female character to, like, a lot of the characters in this game when it comes to the women, is very focused on the men in her life. But, like, in a way that is actually kind of heartrending. And I love her, and she deserves so much better. Because even after Nagamasa dies, Oichi does end up back with the Oda, and she ends up marrying another dude, and sticks with him when there ends up being fighting between him and one of Nobunaga's successors, and ends up on the losing side again. She is ill-fated, and that's unfortunate. Also, she fights with a pair of, like, extending chakrams, and that's neat and cool. I don't know. I really came to like Oichi, and she's one of the emotional stories that actually lands. Falcio said, Omega Force female characters are only included if they fail the Bechdel test. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Okay. Next up, is Okuni. Okuni goes down here with Goemon because, again, she's basically a Chronicles-only character. I'm not sure how much of a historically existent character she is, either. I believe she is based on the woman who would go on to essentially originate kabuki dancing, which is why she's oftentimes, like, she's usually pictured as alongside Keiji up here. Like, they were friends, but you see, like, none of that in the story. I don't think she actually even appears once in the story, or if she does, it's super, super early. Which is a shame, because when I mentioned that there are characters with, like, supernatural stuff going on in this fictionized version of the story, Okuni's one of them. She has the ability to summon the spirits of ghosts or something like that. It's kind of wild. But I guess that's probably why they kept her out. Like, she's also kind of bland beyond her whole, like, I'm a mysterious witch type character. Well, witch dancer, etc. She's a fun character design, but, like, eh. Okay. I don't know. I don't have much to say about her because, again, she's barely in the story. Kunoichi. who I'm using one of her older arts here, so that outfit is not going to match the cloak that she has on. Kunoichi, if you know that word, means female ninja. That's literally her name, though. Though it took until Samurai Warriors 3 for somebody to actually call her by her name and confirm that it wasn't just a title and she was hiding her name. Which, yeah, again, she is actually completely fictitious. She is specifically Yukimura, this dude up here. She is his personal ninja and attendant and bodyguard. And honestly, she's a lot more fun than he is. Like, she's fine in the sense of, like, she is a lot more upbeat to contrast him. She's clearly a little bit exasperated trying to help him, but also puts on a lot of work. And most notably, there's a few fun scenes of her just screwing with the heads of other characters when talking to them. Like, she will literally go into their camp and they'll be like, "Oh, you're an enemy ninja, I have to stop you." And she's like, "No, I'm not. I'm just a regular girl here to talk about crushes." And then somebody will be like, "I don't have time for crushes. I have to get my weapon ready for the battle." And she'll be like, "Aha, I knew it. You are prepping for battle." And she'll run off. Like, it's dumb, but it's fun dumb. So, like, I don't know. I like her. If you're going to do, like, a simple archetype like that, she at least manages to be fun about it. And honestly, she's probably maybe the second most fun of the ninja type characters in this game. Next up, Magoichi. So Magoichi Saika is the leader of a group of mercenaries, and more or less comes to represent kind of every mercenary faction that would have been around. And so he tends to jump exactly what side he's working for. Like, he works for the Oda super early on, and then he ends up helping out the Western Japan factions in resisting the Oda. And in the process, he kind of ends up friends with Hideyoshi, who we'll get to in a bit. And so Hideyoshi hires him to go help like Eastern Japan and kind of infiltrate them, even though they're actively an enemy. And he kind of helps persuade the Date to join up, and like, he ends up weaving in and out of the story as a fairly consistent face, while also being this dude who he is a ladies' man, but the game also gives him shit for the idea that he thinks he's, like, more of a ladies' man than he actually successfully is. And he's never a pervert about it. Like, he's actually just kind of the charming rogue archetype. And they have some fun in one of the bonus scenarios where he overhears a bunch of women talking about who the most desirable dude in the country is, gets offended that he's not mentioned, and proceeds to start a manliness fight among, like, every single desirable guy in the cast. Only for it to help worsen his reputation, because he did that. So, like, they have some fun with his character, and just, I actually kind of like him quite a bit. I sort of always have. It's not just because of the amount of, like, bias I have with him and Masamune. We'll get to that. But, like, I don't know. He is on a Blorbo list. He isn't, like, a super emotional story or anything like that, but he is a fun character I like a lot. Okay. I said I'd talk about Shingen Takeda. So this is the other rival I was talking about to Kenshin. Shingen is the tactician who, if you can read the kanji on that fan, I can almost guarantee you those are the kanji for Furin Kazan. Which, if you've ever heard that mentioned in anything anime or manga or, like, Blaze Blue or anywhere, that was, like, his, like, silent as the wind. I don't remember the whole translation of what it is. But if Kenshin was like the big actual warrior who fought, Shingen was the tactician rival, the brawn versus brain, etc., etc. I don't like him as much as I like Kenshin. They still have yet to really do all that much to humanize him. They do a little bit more with his, like, the people who start off the story working under him. But I mean, one of the people who started off the story working under him is Yukimura, who, like, I already said I don't care for. As swift as the wind, as gentle as forest, as fierce as fire, as unshakable as a mountain. Yeah, that's a translation of it. Yeah. I'd like to be saying something interesting about him, because he is, like, one of the longest standing faces in the series, and pretty historically important, but also, I can't say much about him. I am struggling to, after going through the whole story. Which, there's a whole story mode specifically about him while he's alive before he dies to illness, so, like, something clearly failed there. I remember him having something of a wacky uncle/grandpa vibe in the first game, but I don't know if they kept that up. They didn't. They did not. Okay, speaking of Blorbos, Masamune Date. If you know me, this doesn't come as a surprise that I can just immediately drop him in S tier. So, Masamune does not come into the story until very late. Because most of the story of this game happens when he is literally too young to fight. But towards the end of it, essentially, in the he's way off in, like, the very northeastern tip of Japan. He's away from everything. And what ends up happening is the politics of his local region, he's given control of the clan by his father, who wants to step down. Shortly after, his father is kidnapped, taken into a hostage situation, and Masamune shoots him. At his dad's request, because he doesn't want Masamune to give in, and Masamune deals with this basically emotionally about as well as you'd expect a teenager to do, because he is one of the youngest members of the cast. They have actually aged him up every single Samurai Warriors game, which is really interesting because they don't age up any other character. But, like, in Samurai Warriors 1, Masamune was depicted as, like, 12, and it was really funny because his story was just him showing up in historical battles and beating up both sides. And now he's closer to, like, late teens. Sends you allegations to beat. Listen, I'm not beating certain allegations. If you give me a boy who is probably too young to be on this battlefield, he's going to end up in my favorite character. Which, you know, that counts for, like, so many Fire Emblem characters, for instance. But also, like, even besides that kind of emotional drama and the whole, like, trying to be a teenager, dealing with it all, and struggling with his emotions about it, also, he's probably the single rudest characters in the cast. He is an absolute firebrand. He is picking fights. He is making insults that could probably get his head lopped off. And, like, skirting that very thin line of being ambitious and trying to expand his clan, while also trying not to provoke the massive bear that has unified the rest of the country into actually, like, stealing his land out from under him. He's just a lot of fun as a character, and I adore him. I probably should have grabbed a drink so that my throat will not wear out during this, but I'll be able to go for a couple more characters yet. Okay. Lady No. I had to pick one of the older artworks for her, which does not match her current costume, because the artwork for the current one, that lady's just in the bath. And I wasn't going to risk getting demonetized. I don't get paid to do this. So, Lady No is Nobunaga's wife. Um, and, like, there is a lot of characters in this game who are very much like, a lot of the women are portrayed as very demure and innocent. She is the, like, dangerously sexy archetype. And I do mean dangerous. Her whole thing is that she was married off to Nobunaga as, like, a peace offering, kind of, but also to assassinate him. She keeps a dagger on her person at all times to kill Nobunaga if she decides that Nobunaga is going to fail. If Nobunaga turns out to not be able to do all the things that he's planning to do. And even plans to, if need be, turn that dagger against her own father, who sent her on this mission, if it turns out that, yeah, she does believe Nobunaga will do it. She is not, in spite of that, terribly important to a lot of the threads of the story at hand. But, like, she is definitely pretty memorable among the female cast, and also really just has a great presence. I'm not sure if I want to put her up at the top of okay enough, or, like, in low A tier. I think she ends up in low A, actually. Just because of that extra little bit of drama that they do dig into about her wrestling with whether or not she's going to actually kill him. Man, I hate when I'm married to a woman seeking a partner with goals towards forcing me into personal growth. Oh, she doesn't make Nobunaga better. She wants him to get worse. She just wants him to get worse in a way that will successfully conquer the nation. She's not here to fix him. And that's where I think part of the fun is. And yeah, that's also why I'm going to put her in A. Is she's just as bad as Nobunaga is. And that's why they work. It sounds like you're having fun. How's your evening? I'm having a pretty good evening. I'm glad I did this. This is just fun to yell about. Okay. I'm going to try to get through all the cast that showed up in Samurai Warriors 1 before I go grab a drink. Next up, Hattori Hanzo. So, this is our second ninja character. And Hattori Hanzo is, like, you've probably heard that name before because he is, like, the ninja. Like, the original archetypal ninja. Which begs the question of, is he really that good of a ninja when everybody knew about him? He served Tokugawa, who we will talk about in a bit. It's really funny. Hattori Hanzo is like the character that you play as that serves Tokugawa. He was the only servant of Tokugawa playable in the very original release of Samurai Warriors 1. And that's doubly funny because, like, Ieyasu Tokugawa himself was not playable in Samurai Warriors 1. And he is the most major of major characters. He is the dude who goes on to win at the end of all of it. He is the first shogun of Japan. And Hanzo Hattori is his first ninja. Or like represents like his entire survey corps. And spy corps and everything. And unfortunately, they do like nothing with him. Like, he shows up as an obstacle in a few missions. But he's in, like, maybe 1 or 2 story scenes? Like, they gave him this big redesign with, like, a mask and armor and everything in this game, too, to lean away from the traditional ninja archetype. But, like, I realized I'm raising up my hands, and I'm like, you can't see me. I'm doing this, like, shrug. They do nothing with him, and that's really unfortunate. Speaking of characters they do unfortunately nothing with, Ranmaru Mori is a boy, by the way. Ranmaru is one of Oda's retainers. And in the earlier Samurai Warriors games, when they had a smaller cast, they really kind of played up that he might have been into Oda. Like, he might have been into Nobunaga. In this game, they just kind of forget that. And so Renmaru actually almost doesn't appear in the story because they didn't really leave much for him. In terms of, like, his story importance. Like, I have to give him the top of this because I know who he is. And they have a little bit of fun in one of the bonus scenarios where it's basically the same situation as Magoichi's all-dude showdown, the all-women's showdown, is he gets roped into playing the announcer and then accidentally ends up the final boss. Even though he was trying not to get dragged into it out of mistakes over, the fact he's a dude. But that's actually all they do with Renmaru, which is not great. Historical precedent. Letters from the time implied Nobunaga having affection for his retainer Renmaru. Correct. This series is not afraid of a little bit of Hoge, a little bit of historical roommates. But unfortunately, in the case of Samurai Warriors 4, they forgot about this one, and didn't really leave him anything else. Okay. Speaking of major players that we need to introduce, let's finally talk about Hideyoshi Toyotomi. This dude looks way angrier in his official art than he actually is as a person. Because Hideyoshi's really chill. He's one of Nobunaga's major retainers, but he's oftentimes called the monkey for just being a bit of a goof-off. And, long story short, he's actually a really chill dude who is constantly, throughout the first half of the story, wrestling with the fact that he's helping Oda, he's helping unify the country because he wants a world without war, but he's not really sure how he's going to get from, Nobunaga's warlike tendencies to actual peace. And then Nobunaga dies. And there's an immediate succession war between Nobunaga's sons, and long story short, Hideyoshi backs the one who wins. And in doing so, basically succeeds the entire Oda force, and goes on to push to basically unify the land, or come really damn close. And, he's a lot of fun as a character. There's a lot of time for him to be serious in the story, and dealing with, the weight of everything that he knows he has done. And there's a lot of time for him to goof off and, invoke a lot of shenanigans with the rest of the cast and be the monkey. He's just a really enjoyable character that they do actually, they take the fact that he's as significant a beat of the story as he is to really explore him. He, I'm not sure if I want to necessarily put him in S because he's not necessarily a personal favorite, but I do think he's one of the best executed characters in the game in terms of the story that they tell with him. I missed this question from a bit ago. How did I get into Samurai Warriors? Playing Dynasty Warriors on a random rental, I think, and then finding out there was a Japan version and buying, Samurai Warriors 1 and 2. And then I ended up visiting it again forever, just recently after, a 10-plus year break. Hideyoshi's story with Magoichi in 2 was just so fun. Yes, Magoichi, becomes friends with Hideyoshi, where even when they're working on opposite sides, they're actually still chill with each other. It's all very good. Samurai Warriors 4 was actually released on PC, I think. I think it actually released last year. Yeah, weirdly, the deluxe release of it that has all the DLC came out about a year ago on PC. And is also 40% off right now, by the way. This despite the fact Samurai Warriors 4 is actually 10 years old at this point. 5 is also on Steam. I don't know if I'm going to play 5 because they decided to reboot the franchise with 5 and like redesign all the characters and start telling it all over. And I'm kind of attached to these losers. So okay, we have like 3 more characters to cover who I think are the Samurai Warriors 1 Extreme Legends characters. Yoshimoto Imagawa. It's very funny that this dude became a playable character, because literally his story is that he gets his ass kicked by Nobunaga in the battle that starts it all, and that's it. That is his historical importance. He thought he was going to be big shit, and he just ended up getting shit on. You would think that this would place him in a nothing tier. But I kind of want to place him up here. He has like 1.5 story beats. The first story beat is that he is played as a fool. He is a war shogun, but he's also like, honestly, I just want to go play Kamari, which is like an ancient form of soccer. Like, he would rather just... Like, he was probably just invading the palace out of the desire for more luxury, more than any actual desire to conquer or anything. But they do this interesting thing, where there's a couple other scenes where characters are dealing with him early on in the plot, where it suggests that either he is literally possessed by a demon, or the whole Kamari thing, the obsession, is actually just an act, and he is actually incredibly serious about what he planned to do, and, like, very much recognize the severity of the era. I forget which character it was that he was talking about, but it's just that little extra twist that keeps him out of the absolute bottom tier. That said, that's like everything I have to say about him, because that is everything about him. I do like him for just being a goofball. Okay. So this is Lubu, by which I mean Tadakatsu Honda. He is one of Ieyasu Tokugawa's retainers. He is the strongest goddamn man. The trick was that, like, so the Dynasty Warriors games, the ones based off of Chinese history, have Lu Bu as like this ultimate warrior, this fighter who is just completely overstated every time you run into him, extremely dangerous, you do not want to fight him. Tadakatsu was supposed to be that for Samurai Warriors, but never really had the same impact, I found. Like, he doesn't cut the same level of imposing, despite being like a foot taller than any other character in the game. He's never treated as this invincible wall. And it kind of leaves him in an odd spot where, like, his whole role is to be Ieyasu Tokugawa's muscle and, like, the most dangerous part about him. But that's his entire heckin' character? Like, I can't really tell you anything about him. Which feels weird for somebody who should be such a big deal. But it really is just they wanted like a boss mob character and forgot to actually form him as a character and make him plot relevant. And also make him a boss, because Samurai Warriors 4 is easy as fuck. The game is only dangerous if you are on Nightmare mode. Okay. And then, next up, Ina. Ina is Ieyasu's daughter. Again, a third character we've had introduced around Ieyasu, who... I haven't started talking about Ieyasu himself yet. She's the only archer in the cast. She's very devoted to battle. but then also kind of gets charmed and ends up marrying Yukimura's brother. More on him later. And because the story about Yukimura and his brother is kind of an attempted focal point anyway of Samurai Warriors 4's story, she ends up a little more present. That said, she's like fine. I feel like she has a little bit more depth to her than the man she ends up marrying, despite the fact that I just went into, like, she is primarily also doing the warrior thing, but she is at least distracted and shows an interest outside of purely battle for the sake of battle. Which keeps her a little bit higher. She's fine, I don't dislike her, but she isn't really that much. If that makes any sense. Anyway, I will be right back, like, a minute or two real quick, because I really need to grab something to drink. Hold on. Okay, I can just grab a can of cream soda, that works. Fun fact, there was a rival game series to Samurai Warriors by Koei, Sengoku Basara by Capcom. Date Masamune was who they picked as their poster boy. Honda Tadakatsu was a giant robot, correct. Sengoku Basara was basically Samurai Warriors, but even more crazy in terms of character design. History was more optional. Anyway, that's the first, 19 characters, so we're about 2/5 of the way through. Now the cast that started getting introduced in Samurai Warriors 2. Finally, I get to talk about Ieyasu Tokugawa. So Ieyasu is, I mentioned this earlier, but he is the dude who wins in the end. He is one of Nobunaga's retainers, though reluctant at first for a long time. Then, after Nobunaga dies, he ends up kind of struggling around a bit and then falling in with Hideyoshi, and that turns out to be the winning side there. And really comes to, care about and respect Hideyoshi. And then at the, 90% of the way through the runtime of the story, Hideyoshi dies. Because everybody has to die. And Ieyasu is basically one of the two people who end up competing when the country gets more or less split down the middle. Half of the armies join the side of Mitsunari, who we'll discuss next. The other half join the side of Ieyasu Tokugawa. Tokugawa wins, and proceeds to become the first shogun of Japan. And, he is the dude who wins in the story, which is about warfare. So, it's really a surprise that he was not a playable character until the second game. Now, while I don't particularly care for any aspect of his design, they are very much leaning into the typical Japanese portrayal of a shogun for his design. Like all the armor, the goddamn cheesy top knot that is under his helmet. They do a decent job with him as a character. Mostly. they kind of wrestle between a few moments where he's like, I have to learn to can up my emotions and become sterner for this world in order to help it. And he keeps kind of waffling back and forth on it for a long time, and I don't think I would actually have put him at the bottom of A if it weren't for how well done the scene is when Hideyoshi actually passes on, and Ieyasu just is completely inconsolable in the midst of it, and you can hear him the entire time. It is a moment that carries some kick with it, but he's definitely not as interesting as most of the other major leaders that happen. He's definitely more interesting than Mitsunari. Which, taking a look at this dude for a moment, it shouldn't come as a surprise when I say that Mitsunari Yoshida won at least one of the Samurai Warriors popularity polls. Like, look at this dude. That is a wig, by the way. His actual hair is just standard and dark and still a little bit long, but the whole, like, headdress with the hairpiece is actually a wig. Very fancy man. He's one of Hideyoshi's retainers, who, again, when Hideyoshi dies, the country gets split down the middle, and he picks one side with his friends. And loses. And the truth is I don't have that much else to say about him. I'm gonna put him at the top of boring, because again, there is the scene where Hideyoshi passes away, and he features in there, and gets to be a little bit humanized in that moment. But otherwise, there's actually extremely little focus on him and his pals in this one, in such a way that, like, there's a few of them that are going to end up there as a result of just not being... For how significant a character he is to the end of the story, I don't feel like I really came to know him much. I'm actually probably giving him too much. I think he's better off there. He gets a bigger focus in some of the other games. Like, I know in Samurai Warriors 2, the whole thing where he makes a pact with Yukimura and Kanetsugu, who we'll see shortly, is a much more focused on and thus more naturalized part of the story as they become his allies towards the final chapter. But then they don't really land it here. It's like something that just happens abruptly in a cutscene is these three characters meet and make a pact of justice. And you're like, where did that come from? These characters have never interacted before. And the answer is, I don't know where it came from. So that's unfortunate. Okay. Speaking of characters who are unfortunately fated, this pretty man is Nagamasa Azai. This is Oichi's husband. Omega Force wanted another Three Brothers of Shu, pretty much. Unlike his wife, who genuinely has the emotional weight of the tragedy behind it, I think Nagamasa himself probably just comes down here. He is very noble, and I like the way that nobility ends up putting him against Nobunaga as the first one who's willing to say, no, I'm not okay with the way this is going. But he is very much the chivalrous knight archetype, and not a whole lot else. The tragedy of it all is what I think bumps him up to, like, barely sitting in B tier. But otherwise, he's kind of the same problem of Yukimura, of, like, just being very much the noble warrior, and that's more or less where the character ends. You know what I mean? I don't find him quite as boring as Yukimura, but yeah. Okay. Sakon Shima. Literally, fucking who is this dude? This guy This dude is playable in so many story beats. There are so many missions in this game where he's a selectable character. I think he's in like one cutscene, which is the one where he becomes Mitsunari's tactician. And like, that's it. I don't know anything about what this dude's role in history was, or what his connection to anybody is, or anything. He is, like, there are characters in this that I'm like, okay, you're, like, not in the story, but you end up in the Chronicles. This is Sakon Shima. Like, there's the characters that are basically deliberately relegated only to Chronicles mode and aren't even ever playable in the main story. But, like, this dude is in the main story, and I just don't know a damn thing about him. Okay. I will say that after this, we start getting into some characters who are dealing with some kind of outside drama, kind of. Feels like it should be a tier above or below literally who are you with the tier name. This is X. This is Sakon, but like literally who is Sakon? So this dude, who for some reason is pictured with a whole lot of cats here, is Yoshihiro Shimazu. So at the same time as the Oda are doing their whole stuff that is enveloping most of the center of Japan, the two islands of Japan, which I'm not going to attempt to name, because I don't remember which one is which. I think this one was Kyushu? Yeah, we're gonna go with that. Basically, they have their own infighting going on. The Oda and stuff don't want to mess with them, because it's gonna take, like, a naval fleet and stuff. They need to be organized enough to actually unify the islands. And in the meantime, there's this whole wave of infighting and stuff going on out there. And Yoshihiro is on one side of that. Mostly, he is a big dude who is viewed as kind of a devil in battle for being, like, kind of berserkery, kind of really enjoying it when things are actually going wrong and turning the tides. But he is actually humanized a fair amount by the fact that we're going to get into it, but there's always two playable characters in Samurai Warriors 4. You're always picking two people. And so for the Shimazu story, they made his, I believe it's his nephew, becomes a playable character as well, so he's kind of becoming a father figure, as opposed to just a battle-hungry dude, so he's like, he's fine. He is a big, stout warrior who also has a little bit more in that he's also trying to raise up the next generation of warriors. And he is fighting against Ginchio Tachibana, who, first off, I fucking love her design. She is the goddess of thunder, and she literally rains thunder down on her enemies. As an actual character, they don't... Well, as an actual character, I think I like her a bit more than Mitsunari. The biggest thing that she suffers from is just she has, like, no screen time. But it... more so than anybody else in the cast, she is kind of, like, she is the female warrior devoted to battle. But she has a little bit of teeth in the way she approaches stuff, and her pride and, like, getting aggro on other people. And is that Makoto from Persona 5? I mean, maybe. I was genuinely worried they weren't ever going to let me play as her while I was going through the story, but she does get to be playable in a couple of last missions, and thank goodness, I like her. But, like, she's not particularly interesting as a character in this game. Next up, Kanatsugu Naoi. Do I want to do what Cecil said I wasn't doing and put a beloathed tier? So here's the deal with Kanatsugu. You know how we've had people that were like the chivalrous knight archetype? Or like very much doing the battle-hungry type archetype? Kanatsugu's archetype is scream justice at everything. He is, I am on the side of righteousness and justice about everything. Even when he swaps sides on things. And, like, not in, like, a funny Amelia Will Tesla Seirun way, just in a really annoying way. He might be one of the only characters in this cast I actually dislike. There. Like, the worst part is he keeps showing up in the story, too. But it's not because they have anything interesting to do with him. They just kind of have to keep having him be the loud idealist who doesn't actually stand for anything. The worst stereotype paladin player. Yeah, kinda. Okay. Well, we'll just move on from him to a character I do actually like. Nene. Nene is the other female ninja character that is in this. And she is... Where is he? She is Hideyoshi's wife. And let me tell you, those two are having so much fun being a husband and wife. Like, they actually really like each other, and there's a lot of sweet scenes between them. And also, the part that I think actually puts her really high up for me is not just that she has a good dynamic with Hideyoshi and is fun as a character and lighthearted, it's also that she treats a lot of Hideyoshi's retainers like people we're going to still see, like Tagatora and Mitsunari and stuff. She very much treats them like her kids. She is the team mom, and that's actually really sweet and leads to a couple very fun scenes. She is very, very personable and doesn't feel like she's caught up on the whole I have to find a romance the way most of the other female characters are, partially because she already has one. So yeah, no, I like Nene a lot. Next up, this edgy bastard. This is Kotaro Fuma. What if Hanzo tried to be evil? Literally, this dude thinks he's the chuniest shit on the planet. That said, that's the entirety of his character. He is serving under the Hojo, who we haven't gotten into, but the Hojo were like a mid-eastern section of Japan family that just refused to hacking go down. They outlived the Uesugi. They were the last group to fall to the Toyotomi before they were able to successfully unify Japan. And this dude really clashes with the Hojo, because we'll get into it, but the Hojo are like really personable and very family-oriented. And then there's this dude who would tell you he's the darkness incarnate. like, maybe for having a bit of a personality, he deserves to go up with Renmaru. But, yeah, Kotaro's like, they just don't do much with him. They just leave him as the personality. Actually, okay, we do know who he is and who he is in relation to things. Bottom of C. Okay. Musashi Miyamoto goes in Who the Hell Are You tier. I think Musashi shows up in literally one stage in the entire game. Which is funny, because the name Musashi Miyamoto is a little bit famous as one of the, like, most well-known swordsmiths of Japanese history. But in terms of his actual role and interacting with the story, he's just not in it. This dude is not part of the story. There isn't much I can say about him. He is one of the 4, like, basically Chronicles mode characters. And that's that. Let's move on from that instead of beleaguering that for a long time, because we've already been over a couple of the characters who have been through that. Toshie Maeda. So you remember Keiji up here? Up at the top of B tier? That buffed, roided out adult is apparently the nephew of this dude. Despite the fact that it looks like familially, they should be the other way around. Unfortunately, as nice looking as this dude is, he kind of fits into the realm of Tadakatsu Honda of, I know that he's one of the Oda's retainers. I know that he ends up working with Hideyoshi. I don't think I could tell you a thing about him. They just don't give him any screen time. He's been moisturizing. That would explain a bit. Yeah, there's nothing much else I can say about him. I can talk a lot about Motochika Chosokabe, who is, man, by the time we got to Samurai Warriors 2 XL, which is where this character was introduced, they started to go a little bit wilder on the character designs. This dude is a glam rocker with a shamisen. He is... I said that there were 2 islands where conflict was going on. This guy was leading the other one, Shikoku. And was basically rebelling for the sake of rebelling for as long as he could. Like, he's like, we're gonna keep our home from getting caught up in the tides of war. And they're gonna hear the rebel screams of our soul. He is fine. He is about on par with these guys, I think. In spite of how wild and out there his design is, and the fact that he does get basically a storyline mostly focused around him. I still don't think he's the most interesting character, but he definitely does enough to stand out and be memorable. His story intertwines with Gracia. Who you might notice, first off, her name is Gracia. Second off, she's literally wearing a Western-style dress. Third off, see this dude up here, Mitsuhide? The traitor who killed Nobunaga? That's her dad. I forget what the justification is for it. I think it's that she ends up, like, really falling in love with early Western culture or something. Of basically all the female characters that we get, she is portrayed as the most, like, innocent to the events of the world. But also she is a really fun character because she bounces off a character we'll get to in a bit, who is extremely worldly and basically wants that character to become her mentor. God, I want to talk about Koshosho so much. But yeah, Gracia, her design stands out among the cast. She's not insufferable. She's played largely for comedy, but that is fine when most of the characters in this game are so very serious. I think she goes at the bottom of B. Yeah, that seems right. As opposed to like the more serious characters who just fail to successfully develop underneath her in C tier, she's a comic character who doesn't get a whole lot, but they are having fun with her. There's not a whole lot of story relevance. I want to say, she sides with Motochika, the glam rocker. And even after her father, like, betrays Nobunaga and goes off and stuff, she sticks with his faction. They don't really dig into why. The way she meets Motochika, by the way, is literally that, like, she stows away on a boat with Mitsuhide without Mitsuhide knowing, so they just have fun with her as a character. Next up, Kojiro Sasaki. Again, literally who? Because he is basically a Chronicles character, I think he literally does not show up in any of the story missions. Okuni, I think, briefly does. Goemon, I know, does. Musashi does. I don't remember Kojiro Sasaki showing up in any of them. I will tell you from playing Chronicles mode, this dude is a bit of a lunatic. He is Musashi's rival, and that's why they had to include him when they put Musashi in the game, because the legend of Musashi is the legend of him constantly fighting with Kojiro. And, like, he is a fun enough character in Chronicles mode, but in terms of the main story, literally doesn't exist in it. Okay. That was the cast introduced in the second Samurai Warriors game. Looking at the list, not actually that many standouts. Next is Samurai Warriors 3, which I think I only ever played a little bit of, unfortunately. I was just falling off of Warriors games at the time. Oop, no, that's... this is Katsuye Shibata. I'm sorry, but you're ending up here. Again, he's one of Oda's retainers, and when Oda dies, this is the dude who chooses basically the successor to Nobunaga who loses. And that's where he falls out of the story. We know him a little bit as a dude who cares very much about Oichi, and he is Oichi's second husband, the dude who again proceeds to lose. But they forget to give him, like, any screen time, so I don't know a damn thing about him and his personality. Like, in spite of the fact he should be fairly significant, they just forgot to write him in this game. He must have some really good teeth with this many retainers. Okay. Kiyomasa Kato. So, there are... Samurai Warriors 3 tried to extend on basically Hideyoshi's retainers as kind of a theme. And the people who would support him. And Kiyomasa is one of the people that Nene basically acts as a mom to. And, like, beyond that, I can't really say that much. He's not a bad dude. He's a little bit, he's that character who's, like, somebody makes a joke about him, and he'll go along with it for a second and then be like, hey, wait a second. but I don't feel I know him that much. I know him a little bit better than some of the other characters. But there's kind of like, there are these clusters of characters who have a whole bunch of retainers where they don't all get equal sharings of screen times. Little bit slow to catch on. Yeah. Not a bad dude. Underdeveloped. Don't worry. Here's a character the story will not stop talking about. This is Kanbei Kuroda. He is a dude who looks very scary. He has this whole evil warlock motif. He literally has, like, orbs of darkness he uses as a weapon. But you can also see that there are literally children playing with his mystical orb to ponder it. Because despite being this very serious dude, who puts on this very, like, oppressive air about him, he's actually kind of sweet. He's one of Hideyoshi's 2 tacticians. And we'll get to the other one in a bit. And, like, he always likes to act stoic and stuff, but everybody can absolutely see through it and is constantly calling him out on the fact that he's a softie. And because he's one of the characters who survives from the start of the game to the very end. One of the bonus storylines is literally about him basically coming out of retirement to save the village that he is living in. And kind of dealing with the fact that he has outlived the people that he was friends with over the course of the war, and accepting that this was the peace that they fought for, and that he's kind of allowed to enjoy it. And I'm not sure if I would put him in S, because he doesn't quite break into personal favorite. But God, he's got to be up there. They do a lot with him. Like, he would probably be lower in the A tier if it wasn't for that last chapter that, like, ties together the thematic threads of the story he's been through, so. Yeah, despite how he looks, he is very good. A bit clunky to play, which is unfortunate with how much you end up playing as him, but. Muneshige Tachibana. He is the husband of Ginchio Tachibana, Miss Lightning Goddess. I can tell you less about him than I can about his wife. I feel like the only times we really see him, he is very much doing the paladin, but without Ginchio's bite. So, like, down here, I guess. The Tachibana just are not in the story very much, and when they are, Ginchio's definitely the more memorable two of them. So, like, despite this very... I wonder if this was illustrated by the frickin' Castlevania illustrator, Kojima, now I'm wondering. But... yeah, Sword and Shield Paladin, good dude, doesn't really have any screen time or anything that stands out. Lady Kai of the Hojo. We'll talk about the leader of the Hojo shortly. Kai is the unfortunate victim of a running joke. You'll notice that she's holding, like, a baby boar, or baby bear, and it's because everybody says that, like, treats her like she's this raging animal in the body of a woman, is the joke that keeps going on, because she is very brash and quick to anger. And it's really kind of unfortunate that a lot of the treatment of it is running that joke again. Question, do I need to play the other Samurai Warriors games to understand 4? No. They're all telling basically the same history. They're just doing wildly different interpretations and putting the focus on different characters each time. And, like, making some new ones stand out. So you could just jump in on 4 if you wanted. Anyway, guy is fun, though. Like, she can be... She is actually, like, fun and brash, but also gets flustered and, like, gets distracted, but it's mostly about men. Like, she is kind of suffering from that whole, like, this series likes to write women very much about the men in their lives. But they also tried to give her another woman to bounce off of, in the Hojo faction in this game. I think she's at, like, the bottom of B. No, she's above Ina. They don't really go anywhere with her beyond the running jokes and the general, like, brash design that she has, despite the fact that she has a soft side. They just don't land anything with it. It's a little frustrating. She does, however, have a great line about just wanting to shove her face into this dude's man boobs. And by man boobs, I mean pecs. This is Ujiyasu Hojo. I've mentioned the Hojo a couple times. They are a faction in southeastern Japan who basically hold out and are the last people who have to be defeated and conquered. And Ujiyasu seems like he's sort of the seems like he's sort of the dude who's, like, really feared, but within his people he's actually beloved because he really does care about his people and his family and treats them right. Like, he's doing a good job out there. He's a very respectable father figure for his nation, raising his two daughters. Though he does also get eaten up by the fact that he has to give his son away, which we'll talk about his son in a bit. He's pretty good. I think I want to put him at the bottom of A. This is the man you want your girls to bring home. Kinda, yeah. He's a character who feels like he's, like, a lot rougher around the edges and would insist he's a lot rougher around the edges than he is. Kind of like